Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Israel Issue, and today we're continuing to think about that list of gifts that God placed into the roots of Israel to enable them to be the people He called them to be and to do what He called them to do. And today we're thinking about the gift of the temple service, which was very much part of those gifts that contribute to the irrevocability of Israel's identity, distinguishing the Jewish people, enabling them to survive and indeed to stand out like no other people. Indeed, as the Russian author Tolstoy put it, the Jew is the emblem of eternity. He whom neither slaughter nor torture of thousands of years could destroy. He whom neither fire nor sword nor inquisition was able to wipe off the face of the earth. The Jew is as everlasting as eternity itself. Now, certainly the physical presence of the temple as a building or the tabernacle as a tent gave great sense of identity to the people of Israel. But the actual gift that God placed into the roots of Israel went so much further than this. Now, admittedly, in the Greek word that Paul used in Romans 9:4, the Greek word latria, this spoke very exclusively about the service of God according to the requirements of the Levitical law. But in Hebrew, the word which was used for temple service, the word abad, though it certainly embraced the service of the Levitical priesthood, as we see in Numbers chapter 8, when Aaron will present the Levites before Adonai that they may go about the service, the abad of Adonai. Yet when we go to those words that Pharaoh said to Moses to pass on to the people of Israel, it was the same word abad when he said, but they must go and work abad. No straw will be given to you, but you must deliver the quota of bricks. And indeed, it's this same word, abad, that amazingly we find right back in Genesis chapter 2, where we read, and there was no one to work to abad the ground. So the Hebrew word abad implied that serving God was the same whether you were a Levitical priest in the temple or whether you were out in the fields tilling the ground. Wherever you were, whoever you were, whatever you were doing, it was all about the same thing, which was fulfilling the Torah, loving God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, in the way that the Torah had told you to. And this is because God had said to the whole of the nation of Israel, not just to the Levitical priests, but to every one of them, that even though the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And this was the calling that God had given to every one of the Israelites for every time, wherever they were. And the role of the temple in this, through its sacrificial system, was to enable them to be cleansed from their sin so that they could stay in right standing with God as they went through this process of serving Him. But despite the temple being there, despite its sacrificial system, Israel still did not live up to its calling, which is why Yeshua had to come as the Jewish Messiah to redeem the temple service. And this he did by first as a boy identifying with the temple. Then later on, as he began his ministry, he cleansed the temple. Then later he became the temple, and finally he resurrected the temple. And of course, from our perspective, we can understand this. But at the time, it was not so easy for those around Yeshua to understand this, as happened on that occasion when some of the disciples were caught picking a few ears of corn on the Sabbath, on the Shabbat, and Yeshua said, "I tell you that something greater than the temple is here." So their misunderstanding of what Yeshua was meaning was exactly the same as for those who witnessed Yeshua cleansing the temple and then hearing him say, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." Now, of course, we have the perspective to enable us to understand what Yeshua really meant when he said this, but it still doesn't follow that we actually understand the consequence for those of us who are like grafted in Gentiles, enabled by what Yeshua has done to draw up the redeemed Abad from the roots that God had given to Israel, enabling us to enter into temple service wherever we are and whatever we are doing. But this is what Paul was saying to the Corinthians when he said, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God?" Now, even just at face value, it's clear that this should have immense significance for how we should live as believers. But when we understand that what Paul was speaking about, the temple he was saying we've become, was not using the Greek word which encompassed the whole of the temple, including all those outer courts, but was actually the word naos, which means the inner sanctuary or the holy place. This is the significance that even we who are grafted in Gentiles have been given in God's sight. And then when we remember that in the days of the physical temple, the penalty for Gentiles who went beyond the court of the Gentiles was the death sentence, then we realize the significance of the life that we have been given, that we may draw up that redeemed experience of Abad, that Yeshua has redeemed out of the roots of Israel, that we, even as grafted in Gentiles, can draw up such that we can then take on the identity and indeed live out the identity of a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through our high priest. And that's not just to be lived out in our worship lives, but in the whole of our lives, whatever we're doing, however mundane it is, that we may do it all to the glory of God, strengthened by this understanding of Abad, that it is all about temple service, whatever we are doing, that we do it for his praise and his glory. And as we do this, for a light to shine out of us that can point others to the one true God, the God of Israel. Now, if you'd like to think more about this being strengthened by the Abad, the temple service that Yeshua redeemed from the roots of the gifts that God has placed in Israel, then do go to our website, www.letthelion.com. Go to the Israel Issue tab, and there you'll find a short study to go with today's episode. And if you're watching for the first time, do hit that subscribe button so to get it direct in the future. Please also tell others about this most important of messages. And I look forward to being back with you in the near future with another episode of the Israel Issue.